Welcome back, dearest viewers. 'Tis I, once again, Asteria the Hag. I've returned to explain why you should GM Daggerheart. I've tried this so many times, and I think the best way is to just start with my first game that I ran at PAX Unplugged. I knew that the Daggerheart offerings at conventions so far had mostly been the Quick Start Adventure, which is lovely, and I'll make another video about maybe. But I wanted people to have another option, especially people who had already played it. And since I love this damn game, I wanted to swing big. I wanted to swing big and show what Daggerheart could really do. So I listed my first game as full cooperative storytelling. I prepared zero plot. I prepared zero story, zero content, so my players and I could build a scenario together at the table. Lazy? No. As us late diagnosis ADHDers know, there's no such thing as lazy. There's just work sooner and work later. It often involves very different kinds of work. In Daggerheart, like in most TTRPGs, you know you're going to have to do a bunch of the work later part anyway, right? You're going to have to make stuff up in a moment. And Daggerheart in particular specifically asks you to do more of that at the table work. Stuff that would actually undo classic session prep. You're supposed to ask the players to describe the world, and you're supposed to follow the characters where they take you if it makes sense for the story, and they're the main characters of the story. So if that sounds like a relief to you, if you're the kind of person who says, no matter how hard I tried, no matter how many days, nights, and weeks I sit down and try to prepare something brilliant in advance, the brilliant stuff always comes in the moment or right beforehand. Because I have read that some poor souls experience that in important periodicals. If that sounds like a relief, let's talk about the tools Daggerheart gives you to actually do all that. And the little zhuzh I added just to really max it out. Okay, so the basic ideas I just talked about, nothing new. People have been saying things like prep situations, not stories, for years. My big roadblock with trying to run Dungeons & Dragons was that then the story would bring us to conflict, often conflict that needed to be resolved physically. Without getting too far into Dungeons & Dragons stuff, here's the point. Daggerheart makes it shockingly easy to pull a combat out of your ass. That's the full quote. Maybe you didn't need the rest of this video, but in case, an explanation would help. First of all, sitting down and building a combat from scratch is much simpler in Daggerheart than in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and I'll talk about that in probably my third video. This is video 1. But more importantly, I've got one word for you, kid. Environments. Environments are why I could show up at PAX Unplugged and say, oh, what genre are we feeling today? Classic fantasy? Okay, let's throw out ideas for how your group knows each other. I just realized my heater was on this whole time. I really hope I don't have to re-record this whole thing. You see, an environment is a pre-assembled encounter. Not a fight necessarily, but a scene or space characters can interact with. Each one has an overall difficulty, an evocative description, and suggestions for potential adversaries. They also have special features, interesting events or effects that the characters might trigger. They're easy to tweak or reflavor, and your players have options as to how their characters engage. Some can be a one-shot unto themselves. Hell, start your campaign with Outpost Town, and you can be happy there for a few sessions, I think. So when my players agreed that their adventurers for hire would start the game of traveling through a forest, I knew that we would be ending up at the Abandoned Grove. You can't read this. Outdoors, mysterious, lots of opportunities for the druid character and the rogue character. And I used no map or mini figurines. I just described it. And the way distance works with abilities in Daggerheart makes that particularly fine. Something that's very cool, and this is where I should mention that I'm in no way being paid by Darrington Press. I'm not affiliated with them whatsoever. I think I have probably annoyed them at this point with my enthusiasm for their game, so I promise I'm not trying to sell you anything. But for playing in person, I think it's neat. They sell cards for all the players' powers, and now they've announced that they're going to release adversary cards, which would be extra cool for a game master because you can draw them from a deck. You could do random adversaries. Which brings me to my little extra eye of newt in the cauldron. To help us generate ideas on the fly, I brought the Dice of Story tarot cards. Specifically the Alleyman's Tarot. I'm not a tarot practitioner, just a tarot lover, FYI. I really love the Alleyman's Tarot. As you can tell, each card is a totally different art style. Really fun and helpful for just getting a visual in your head, kind of Rorschaching your way to a story beat or character. So at the beginning, I pulled a card to determine who had hired our fine adventurers, and I pulled the Queen. Spot on, great, very literal. I didn't even have to do a Rorschach. And a little ways in, I drew a card without showing them to see if I could come up with like a little event or obstacle, and drew the Hole, which is why they suddenly had to deal with a huge pitch trap in the road. That's just an example. You don't have to go this far and literally prep nothing. That's certainly not what I did for my podcast. Queen of Daggers, Heart of Fire. Who's that? They sound like they have good taste. But I want to illustrate just how possible that is, to decide you're going to sit down with your friends and try the game out. Like, yeah, you should learn the rules first. But you don't have to master the rules to try out a session. And you don't have to know exactly what's going to happen or even roughly what's going to happen, especially when you're all just sitting down to try out the game and have fun. Remember that the game is what happens at the table between the people playing it. All right, we got through it. This is how I felt after the first game. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it this far, next part will be another game I ran. We'll get into more detail about how I actually talk to players at a table and use their ideas to make a story. I don't think I sucked at it.